Welcome to 28storms.com. This is your tropical weather update for Saturday, September 17th. We will be taking a close look at Eastern Pacific development in just a moment, but first off, and starting with the Atlantic Basin, we have a broad area of low pressure to the south of the Cape Verde Islands. The National Hurricane Center is giving this area a 20% chance of tropical development within the next 48 hours. The morning surface analysis from the Tropical Analysis Forecast branch shows a well-defined 1009 millibar surface low to the south of the Cape Verde Islands. This is also 97L invest, so the National Hurricane Center is keeping a close watch on that area of low pressure, but also notice that we have a weak 1012 millibar low out ahead of that system, closer to 40 degrees west longitude, and there is some disagreement as to which low has the better potential for development, and we will closely be going over that in some of the model guidance. And also really quickly, you'll notice that there's really not a whole lot occurring in the Eastern Pacific just yet, but we still have this broad monsoon trough, and there is the possibility for development along that feature. This is the latest water vapor animation for much of the western half of the Atlantic Basin, and you will notice that there is quite a lot of convection, especially in and around Central America, the Lesser Antilles, and just off the east coast and into the Bahamas. However, we see that there is also a very strong and potent upper level low swirling about near and over Puerto Rico, and there's a second upper level low over Central America. Both of these features combined with a lot of troughing, especially over the western Atlantic, means that the vertical wind shear is just too strong for any development anywhere close to home right now. But if we move into the central Atlantic, you will notice that the troughing only extends as far east as the Lesser Antilles, and we also have a more powerful trough between 20 and 25 degrees north latitude. But down here in the deep tropics, we can tell that the shear is a lot more relaxed. So if any tropical disturbances exiting Africa can maintain a more westerly motion underneath this trough, then it could encounter more favorable conditions, and there is some chance that we could see tropical development. Switching over to the regional visible imagery, we can see that there are two distinct areas of low pressure, much like what was indicated on the surface analysis map. This is the one that was first designated 97L invest. This has some chance of becoming the next system, although once again we have this weak 1012 millibar surface low out ahead of our primary system, and there is some disagreement within the models as to which one could develop. Of course, if this one were to develop, since it's a little bit more toward the south and west, then it would have a slightly greater chance of possibly impacting the Eastern Caribbean down the road, but that wouldn't be set in stone just yet. And of course, there's still the chance that this one becomes the more dominant system, and that would give this a more or higher likelihood of recurving out to sea, especially with this upper level trough dangling across between 20 and 30 degrees north. The latest Sims wind shear analysis indicates that much of the western half of the basin is being dominated by 30 to 40 knots of vertical wind shear, and we also have quite a lot of strong shear between 15 and 20 degrees north latitude, even across the eastern Atlantic. But once again, if any one of these tropical disturbances remain a little bit more toward the south between 10 and 15 degrees, then this will have a greater chance of development, and the models are showing a somewhat favorable pattern over the next 5 to 7 days. This is just a quick look at the upper level conditions and the overall mechanisms that are influencing the wind shear values. And of course, we still have that upper level low near Puerto Rico. We have a lot of southwest shear in excess of 20 to 30 knots. But then below the trough over the eastern Atlantic, we have a fairly good upper level ridge. It's relatively small, but if any system can remain under that one for an extended period of time, then it will have a greater chance of getting its act together. And yet another factor that would be beneficial for any low pressure that stays more toward the south is that the sea surface temperatures are a little bit warmer near 10 degrees north, and they become progressively warmer as we inch closer to the Caribbean. Starting off with the 12Z run of the Canadian CMC model, we can see that the model is picking up on both areas of low pressure in the eastern Atlantic. This is the first one, and this is 97L invest, and if we go ahead and put this into motion, you will see that it really doesn't develop the first area of low pressure all that much, but by day 6 it's quite apparent that it's developing 97L into a rather decent tropical storm, and it's also alluding to the possibility of development here in the eastern Pacific. Now, as mentioned before, if that first area of low pressure were to find a way to become the more dominant feature that ends up developing, then that would slightly increase the odds of the Eastern Caribbean being infected, and the latest 12Z run of the GFS somewhat alludes to that possibility. We see that the first low is the one that the model is developing, and it's showing a much more westerly track with that one, eventually taking this into the Eastern Caribbean, or at least the Lesser Antilles by day 7, and it's really not until a second tropical wave exits the coast of Africa until we see a second tropical system develop. And of course, as mentioned before, any system that develops closer to the coast of Africa or Cape Verde Islands is going to be more prone to recurving away from land. Now, one thing that both the Canadian CMC and the GFS models agree upon is the idea that the upper level environment will remain favorable between 10 and 15 degrees north latitude. This is the latest shear forecast, and the lighter blue colors indicate areas that are somewhat favorable with low wind shear, and we see a good pocket of upper level ridging extending westward with time, and eventually by day 7, or at least by day 6, it's expanding all the way to the Eastern Caribbean islands. And finally, this is the 12Z run of the ECMWF. By 24 hours, you can make out both areas of low pressure. This is the first one here. This is 97L invest. By day 2 and day 3, we still don't really see much in the way of development, but by day 4, notice that the system in the Eastern Pacific is becoming better defined here near the Gulf of Tehuantepec. And by day 5, we see that the first area of low pressure is still hanging in there. It's not quite as strong as what the GFS was indicating, but it still shows both of these areas of low pressure quite well. In fact, it looks like 97L is well on its way to becoming a tropical cyclone based on this run. And by day 6, notice that this area of low pressure is taking the more westerly track that's being indicated by the GFS, but the good news is that it's not showing any development, and instead 97L looks to be the more dominant system that could become Ophelia. And then by day 7, notice that the tropical storm that developed to the south of Mexico is still continuing west-northwest, so that is something that we do like to see. We rather see a movement that is parallel to the coast instead of perpendicular. And also notice that the area of broad low pressure is beginning to move into Barbados and Dominica, and by day 8, this low falls apart as it gets into the Eastern Caribbean, and our potential tropical storm Ophelia is recurving and steadily weakening over a less favorable upper level environment. And really quickly before I close out this afternoon's video, this is a look at the Eastern Pacific. We don't really have anything that looks overly impressive out there at the moment, but this is the feature that the models are showing gradually getting its act together over the next 3 to 5 days. We do have a broad area of low pressure. You can make out the cyclonic spin. There's really not that much in the way of convection right now, and the upper level environment only appears to be marginal for some slow development, but the models are showing that the conditions could become a little bit better over the next 72 hours, so we will be keeping a very close watch on both the Atlantic and the Eastern Pacific, and so far it looks like the system will be taking a west-northwest track just to the south of the coast, but of course we will keep a very close watch on things. So overall, we're looking fairly good again this afternoon. Any landfall threats appear to be very marginal at this time, but we will continue to monitor the tropics. Go ahead and keep it tuned to 28storms.com. We will have another video by tomorrow afternoon.